Hello, and welcome. You're listening to another amazing episode here at Code Your English, the channel that helps you not just learn the language, but live through it. I'm really glad you're here. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you paused, really paused, to ask yourself where you're headed? Not just geographically or professionally, but emotionally, mentally, personally. In a world that's always moving, pushing, demanding, how often do we check in with the person we're becoming? That's what we're talking about today. And not just in a vague, motivational, feel-good kind of way. We're going deep. Because growth, real, sustainable, self-directed growth, isn't just about having a positive mindset or setting random goals on New Year's Day. It's a structured, ongoing process. And like any process, it needs a framework, something you can return to when things feel messy or uncertain. That's where the growth formula comes in. It's an acronym. Each letter represents a key principle that supports meaningful self-development. G for goals, R for routine, O for ownership, W for willpower, T for time management, and H for habits. Together, these 6 ideas form the roots, the branches, and the leaves of your personal growth journey. You could think of them like the design of a garden you're responsible for tending. Some days, it blooms effortlessly. Other days, it takes everything just to water the soil. But the point is, you're growing, whether you notice it or not. Now, because this is Code Your English, we're doing 2 things at once. Yes, we're diving into the psychology and philosophy of self-improvement, but we're also sharpening your listening comprehension, stretching your expressive vocabulary, and building your awareness of how advanced English really sounds when it's used to explore rich human topics. So, you'll hear me use idiomatic expressions, natural phrasing, and the kind of spoken English you're more likely to hear in a thoughtful conversation than in a textbook. I'll also ask questions, not just to keep you engaged, but to encourage self-reflection. Because listening isn't passive. Not here. This is an active space for growth, both linguistic and personal. Now, you might be wondering, why these 6 ideas? Why this formula? Well, I'll be honest with you, it's not magic. It's not something I pulled from a best-selling book or a viral YouTube video. It's a pattern I've seen over and over again. In people I admire, in learners who make real progress, and, yes, in my own life too. Every time I've felt lost, stuck, overwhelmed, or distracted, it's because one or more of these 6 areas had been neglected. Think about it. Without goals, we drift. Without routine, we lose momentum. Without ownership, we wait for change instead of creating it. Without willpower, we give in to short-term comfort. Without time management, we run out of space to do what matters. And without habits, we slide back into autopilot mode, even when we're trying to move forward. Sound familiar? But here's the good news. You don't have to fix everything at once. This isn't a quick fix episode. It's more like planting a seed or coding a long-term project. Little by little, you build the system. You design your own version of the growth formula, one that fits your goals, your life, and your rhythm. And that's exactly what we'll explore together in this episode. One letter at a time. With each section, I'll share insights, real-life examples, and questions to help you connect these concepts to your own experience. You'll not only improve your English by tuning your ear to the flow of advanced speech, you'll also deepen your self-awareness and reflect on how you move through the world. So, are you ready? Ready to take a closer look at the systems behind your behavior, the mindset behind your habits, the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of? Because that's where real growth begins. Not outside, but inside. Not tomorrow, but today. And as we go through this episode, remember, this isn't just about listening to me. It's about listening to yourself. Let's begin with the first step of the growth formula. G for goals. G, goals. Vision as the first step. Let's start with the foundation, the G in the growth formula. Goals. Now, I know the word goal gets thrown around a lot. Set goals. Chase your goals. Don't give up on your goals. It's almost become a motivational cliché, hasn't it? But if we slow down and actually sit with the idea, we start to realize that goals aren't just boxes we check off. They're directional markers. They're how we give shape and structure to the kind of life we want to live. In language, in career, in relationships, in identity. Think of a goal as a kind of internal compass, a way to point yourself toward the version of you that you're trying to become. But here's the thing. Not all goals are created equal. There's a big difference between a vague desire, like, I want to get better at English, and a clearly defined objective, like, I want to hold a 15-minute conversation in English without switching to my native language by the end of the month. One is a wish. The other is a plan. So many of us confuse wanting something with working toward it. And it's not because we're lazy. Often, it's because we're unclear. We haven't taken the time to map out the details. What does better mean? What would progress actually look like, feel like, sound like? How would you know if you're getting closer? These questions matter. Without them, your goal is just floating around in your head, weightless, untethered, and easy to forget. When I started Code Your English, for example, I didn't just say, I want to help people learn English. That was the seed, yes. But it wasn't enough. I had to break that idea into specific goals. Who do I want to help? What kind of content will I create? How often will I publish? How will I measure success? By followers, by feedback, by how useful it actually is to real people. That process of clarifying and committing is what transforms a dream into a direction. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it takes sitting with discomfort. Sometimes it means admitting what you've been avoiding. But without clarity, progress is nearly impossible. Because you're not aiming at anything specific. Let me ask you this. What's a goal you've held on to for a long time, but haven't taken real steps toward? You know the one. The thing that keeps coming back into your thoughts when you're on a walk or just before you fall asleep. The idea that lights something up inside you, but never seems to get any closer. Why do you think that is? Is it fear? Perfectionism? Or maybe you've never broken it down into smaller, actionable steps. This is where collocations can be really useful, not just for your English, but for your mindset. In English, we say things like set a goal, work toward a goal, achieve a goal, or let go of a goal. Notice how active those expressions are. Goals are something we set, we chase, we adjust, we refocus. They require participation. They don't achieve themselves. And there's another important layer here, your long-term vision. Short-term goals help you move day to day. But your vision? That's your horizon. That's what helps you stay grounded when progress feels slow or invisible. For language learners, that might mean imagining yourself giving a presentation in English, or traveling alone with confidence, or even teaching others what you've learned. Vision gives your goals meaning. It connects your present efforts with your future identity. That's why it's not enough to just write down goals like study more or improve speaking. Those are starting points, not destinations. Instead, try asking yourself, what would this look like in real life? What's the next visible step? What resources, time, or support do I actually need to make this happen? Don't let your goals stay blurry. Bring them into focus And when you do, they become much easier to act on, not just think about. Now, I want to be honest with you. Goal setting can also bring up feelings of frustration or self-doubt, especially if you've set goals in the past and didn't follow through. That's normal. We all have a list of things we said we'd start someday. But guess what? You're here now. You're listening, you're reflecting, you're engaging with these ideas in a second language. That's not nothing. That's a powerful step forward. And if your inner critic tries to speak up, you know, that voice that says, you've tried before and failed, or you're not consistent enough, remind yourself, growth isn't linear. Just because a goal didn't stick the first time doesn't mean it was the wrong goal. Maybe it just wasn't the right strategy or the right season of your life. So as we wrap up this section, I'll leave you with a gentle challenge. Pick one goal, just one, that matters to you right now. Make it specific. Make it visible. Write it down, say it out loud, share it with someone, or even send it to yourself in a message. And most importantly, identify the next step, not the final step, just the next one. Because that's how momentum builds, not in giant leaps, but in small, steady choices. Let's take a deep breath. You've just completed the first piece of the growth formula. That internal compass, that goal, is now on your radar. And that's something to be proud of. Up next, we'll explore the role of routine, the often overlooked structure that holds your goals in place when motivation disappears. But for now, give yourself a moment. You're not just learning English. You're learning yourself. Let's keep going. Our routine. The invisible architecture of success. So, we've talked about goals, how they give you direction, how they transform vague desires into tangible steps. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. Goals don't work without structure. And that's exactly where our second letter comes in. R for routine. Now, routine might sound boring at first, even a little rigid. But think of it this way. Your routine is the invisible architecture that holds your life together. It's the quiet system that shapes who you become. Not overnight, but little by little, day in, day out. And when you really start to pay attention, you'll notice something fascinating. It's often not the big dramatic actions that make the difference in your life. It's the small, repeated behaviors that either build you up or wear you down. Let me give you an example. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wait to feel inspired. You don't give yourself a motivational speech every time. You just do it. Why? Because it's part of your routine. Now, imagine if you approached your language learning or your personal development with that same mindset. What if it wasn't about feeling motivated, but simply about showing up? Here's the thing. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It's emotional, and emotions are naturally unstable. Discipline, on the other hand, the kind that's built into a routine, that's what creates results. Especially when you don't feel like doing the thing. Especially when you're tired, distracted, or doubting yourself. That's when your routine becomes your anchor. It keeps you from drifting. In English, we often say things like, stick to your routine, fall off track, or anchor your day. These phrases tell us something important. Routines can stabilize us. They give us something to return to when life gets chaotic, or when we lose sight of the bigger picture. Now, let's make this real. Imagine you're someone who's learning English and working full-time. Your days are already packed, but you decide you want to improve your listening skills. So instead of telling yourself, I'll practice when I have time, which, let's be honest, rarely works, You build a simple routine, 10 minutes of podcast listening every morning while you make coffee. That's it. No drama, no pressure, just part of the flow of your day. And over time, that adds up. You start to notice words more easily. Your ear becomes sharper. You gain confidence. And it didn't require huge amounts of willpower, just consistency. Routines are powerful because they reduce the number of decisions you have to make. That's something successful people across fields have understood for a long time. Take athletes, for example. Serena Williams, LeBron James. Their routines are almost sacred. It's not just about physical training, but about mental preparation, sleep patterns, nutrition, even pre-game rituals. Or look at writers like Haruki Murakami. He once said he wakes up at 4 a.m., writes for 5 to 6 hours, then goes for a run. Same thing every day. Why? Because creativity isn't magic. It's built through routine. It's in the rhythm, not just the inspiration. And yet, despite all of this, many people resist routines. Maybe it feels restrictive, or maybe the idea of doing the same thing every day just sounds dull. But here's a thought. Routine doesn't kill freedom. It creates it. When you automate the important parts of your day, you free up mental energy. You don't waste time deciding what to do. You already know. Your system is doing the work for you. That said, routines do require something from you. Self-awareness. You have to notice when you're slipping, when you've fallen off track, and most importantly, you have to give yourself permission to begin again, without guilt, because you will fall off track. That's part of being human. But the real strength isn't in never falling. It's in your ability to return, to reset, to recommit. So let me ask you, what routines are currently shaping your life, either consciously or unconsciously? And which ones are missing? Are your mornings chaotic or calm? Do your evenings help you recharge, or just scroll mindlessly through your phone? What's one small routine you could add, starting tomorrow, that would help support the goals you set earlier? The answer doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, it shouldn't be. Start small. Maybe it's 5 minutes of journaling. Maybe it's closing your tabs and playing calming music before sleep. Maybe it's reading a paragraph in English instead of checking the news first thing in the morning. You don't need to redesign your life. You just need to install better rhythms. Routines are personal, but they're also powerful. They help you build trust with yourself. Because when you stick to a routine, even a tiny one, you're telling yourself, I follow through. I do what I say I will. And that kind of self-trust, it's priceless. So as we close this section, I encourage you to reflect not just on what you want to achieve, but how you're structuring your days to get there. Because goals give you vision, yes, but routine gives you movement. And without movement, vision stays stuck in your imagination. You're not just learning English. You're learning to create a life that supports who you're becoming, day in, day out. Next up, we'll talk about one of the most transformative ideas in the entire growth formula, something many people avoid but absolutely need: ownership. And trust me, this one might challenge you in the best way possible. But for now, breathe, reset, and ask yourself, what will I return to tomorrow without needing motivation to get started? Let's keep growing. O. Ownership. Stepping into your power. So far, we've looked at goals as the compass and routine as the daily engine behind growth. But now we arrive at something deeper and possibly more uncomfortable. The O in the growth formula stands for ownership. And if I'm being honest, this might be the most important and the most confronting part of the whole process. Let me ask you something directly. Where in your life are you still waiting for permission to act? Where are you hoping someone else will make the first move, open the door, or somehow give you the green light to become who you already know you could be? These are not easy questions, but they're essential if you're serious about growth. Ownership means something very simple but very powerful. You stop blaming and you start claiming. You take responsibility for your choices, not just the good ones, but all of them. It's the moment you stop saying, "This is happening to me," and start saying, "This is happening through me." That shift, from passive to active, is where personal power begins. And yes, in English, we really do talk about stepping into your power. It's a metaphor that suggests waking up to your own agency, your own influence over the direction of your life. We use verbs like own, acknowledge, reclaim. We say things like take the reins, meaning to take control, like a rider guiding a horse. On the flip side, we also have the expression play the victim, which describes someone who constantly avoids responsibility and instead focuses on being wronged, misunderstood, or stuck. And look, we all do this sometimes. Life is hard. We get overwhelmed. We compare ourselves to others. We convince ourselves that our circumstances are the reason we can't move forward. And to be fair, some circumstances are real barriers, financial limitations, health issues, systemic inequalities. This is not about denying reality, but it is about asking, even within those limits, what can I choose? What can I control? Because there's always something, always a next step, always a way to show up differently. Let's talk for a moment about language learning, since that's why many of you are here. You've probably said to yourself at some point, "I don't have time," or "I'm not good at speaking," or "I never had a good English teacher." And maybe all of those things are true. But here's what ownership asks you. Now what? What are you going to do about it? Because you can't change your past, but you can absolutely shape your future. And that starts with owning your part in the process. Ownership isn't about shame. It's not about saying, "It's all my fault." It's about acknowledging your influence. You don't have control over everything, but you do have control over your effort, your mindset, your habits, and your choices. And that's more power than you might think. The tricky part is, ownership is quiet. It's internal. It doesn't get a round of applause. No one sees it when you decide not to complain, or when you choose to show up for something, even when it's hard, or when you finally let go of a blame story you've been repeating in your mind for years. But those are the moments that change everything. Slowly, quietly, permanently. I remember a time in my own journey, not just as a creator but as a human, when I caught myself blaming everything around me. Algorithms, schedules, people not responding. It felt safe to blame, because if it wasn't my fault, then I didn't have to do anything differently. But nothing changed until I looked in the mirror and said, "Okay, what's my part in this? What am I avoiding? What am I afraid of?" And once I owned that, really owned it, I started to move again. And that movement created momentum. And that momentum led to real growth. This is exactly why ownership is such a vital part of the growth formula. Without it, your goals and routines will feel hollow, like you're doing things for someone else, or waiting for some imaginary approval. But when you take ownership, every decision becomes yours. Your learning becomes yours. Your life becomes yours. So, here's your reflection prompt for today. And I suggest you really sit with this one. Where in your life are you still waiting for permission to act? Where are you blaming others, your past, or your circumstances, instead of stepping forward and taking the reins, Start there. Be honest. And don't judge yourself for the answer. Just notice it. Awareness is the beginning of all change. As we wrap up this section, remember, you are not powerless. Even when it feels like you have no options, you still have the power to choose how you show up, what you focus on, what story you tell yourself, and what you do next. And that's a kind of power no one can take from you. Next, we'll explore something equally important, and often misunderstood, the W in our formula. Willpower. It's the part of you that shows up in the storm. But for now, take a breath. And remember, when you own your life, you unlock the freedom to change it. Let's keep growing. W. Willpower. Navigating the inner storm. If ownership is about taking back control of your choices, then willpower is what gives you the strength to follow through on them, especially when it's hard. And let's be honest, most of the time, it is hard. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. It happens in resistance. In those invisible inner battles that no one else sees, but that you feel deep in your chest every time you sit down to do the thing you said you would do. Let's call this what it is: an inner storm. 1 minute, you're ready to work on your goals, and the next, you're scrolling through your phone. You tell yourself you'll practice English after lunch, but somehow the afternoon slips away. You know what you want, but you still don't do it. And then comes the guilt, the frustration, the little voice in your head that whispers, "What's wrong with me?" Sound familiar? That's where willpower comes in. It's not about being perfect, and it's not about being robotic. It's about learning how to stay with the discomfort long enough to push through it. Or, as we say in English, dig deep. Willpower is the ability to do what matters most, even when you don't feel like it. It's the muscle that lets you stay on the path when every part of you wants to run back to what's easy and familiar. Now, willpower isn't magic. It's actually more like a battery. It drains with overuse. That's why, by the end of a long day, it's often harder to resist distractions or bad habits. Your brain is tired. Your decision-making energy has been used up. This is why people talk about making healthy choices in the morning, because your willpower is stronger before the mental fatigue sets in. And here's where routines, what we talked about earlier, connect with willpower. When you build habits into your day, you reduce the need to constantly rely on willpower. You don't need to argue with yourself or summon motivation. You just do it. But of course, that kind of automation takes time. And in the meantime, you'll need to lean on your inner strength. Let me share a quick personal insight. There was a time, not that long ago, when I had a plan to record new podcast episodes, including this very series. I'd mapped out the topics, set deadlines, even imagined how I wanted each episode to feel. But when the moment came to hit record, I hesitated. Not because I didn't care. I cared deeply. But because fear crept in. The fear of not being good enough. The fear of making mistakes. The fear of speaking into silence. I kept telling myself, I'll do it tomorrow. But we all know what that usually means. So what changed? Nothing dramatic. I didn't wake up with a sudden burst of energy. I didn't read an inspiring quote or watch a motivational video. I simply decided to do the work anyway. I put on my headphones, opened my notes, and recorded. Even though I didn't feel ready. I had to push through the discomfort and trust that clarity would come after action, not before. And it did. That's what willpower is. Not waiting for perfect conditions, but acting despite the storm. And often, the hardest part is just starting. Once you take that first step, open the book, speak the first sentence, hit the record button, the resistance begins to loosen. Not disappear completely, but loosen enough to move forward. In English, we have expressions like mind over matter, which means using your mental strength to overcome physical or emotional challenges. We say things like power through, dig deep, or hold the line. These idioms all carry the same message. Don't give up just because it's uncomfortable. Growth requires effort, and that effort doesn't always feel good. But the results? The resilience? The confidence? The integrity? That's where the reward is. Now, I also want to acknowledge something important here. Willpower alone is not the answer to everything. You're not a machine. You have limits. And sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is rest, not push. So how do you know the difference between needing rest and just avoiding discomfort? That's where self-awareness comes in. Listening closely to the quality of your resistance. Is it fear? Is it burnout? Is it procrastination disguised as perfectionism? Ask yourself. Be honest. And choose accordingly. So here's your reflection prompt today. Where in your life do you need to dig deep? Not forever, but just long enough to take the next step. What's the thing you keep putting off? Not because you don't care, but because it challenges you. What would happen if you did it anyway? Not perfectly, but honestly? This kind of self-inquiry isn't easy, but it's essential. Because once you start showing up for yourself in those small moments, the voice in your head begins to change. You begin to trust yourself. And that trust is what makes long-term growth possible. So, as we move forward, remember this. Willpower won't carry you the whole way, but it can get you past the hardest part, the beginning. After that, momentum takes over. And the more often you push through resistance, the stronger your internal compass becomes. In our next section, we'll explore something that everyone talks about, but few people truly master: time management. Not just how to get more done, but how to direct your energy toward what actually matters. But before we go there, take a moment. Close your eyes if you can. Breathe. And ask yourself, what would I do today if I stopped waiting to feel ready? Let's keep growing. T. Time management. The currency of attention. So far, we've explored goals, routines, ownership, and willpower, the internal forces that drive meaningful change. But all of those things depend on one critical ingredient: time. And that brings us to the T in the growth formula. Time management. Now, let's be honest. Most people, when they hear the phrase time management, immediately think of to-do lists, calendars, productivity hacks, or squeezing more into already packed schedules. But the truth is, managing time isn't really about hours. It's about attention. It's about where your focus goes. Because your time is finite. You can't pause it, save it, or rewind it. Time is a non-renewable resource. Once it's spent, it's gone. The real question isn't just how you're spending your time, but what you're giving your attention to. And why? There's a saying in English: use your time wisely. But what does that really mean? For some people, it means being productive, ticking off tasks, meeting deadlines, staying busy. But activity isn't the same as progress. You can be extremely busy and still feel like you're moving in circles. Real time management begins when you ask yourself, am I giving my time to what truly matters? And that's not a technical question. It's an emotional one. Take a moment and think about your average day. How often do you lose track of time? Not because you're absorbed in something meaningful, but because you've fallen into autopilot. Maybe it starts with checking social media for just 5 minutes, and suddenly, an hour is gone. Or maybe you sit down to study, but keep switching tabs, checking messages, jumping between tasks, until your focus is completely fractured. We often underestimate how much energy we lose through distraction. And that brings us to a big myth, something we all fall for at some point: multitasking. We think we're being efficient by doing several things at once. But study after study shows the opposite. The human brain isn't designed for multitasking, at least not for complex tasks that require deep thought. What we're really doing is switch tasking, jumping rapidly between tasks and losing focus every time we switch. That mental friction adds up. It drains your energy, slows down your work, and creates a false sense of productivity. This is why managing your attention is just as important, maybe even more important, than managing your schedule. Because the reality is, you don't need more time. What you need is clearer priorities and fewer distractions. And for that, you need to get honest about where your time is really going. Let me share a personal insight here. There was a period when I kept telling myself, I don't have time to write. I don't have time to record. And on paper, that was kind of true. I had a full plate. But when I really looked at how I was spending my evenings, let's just say I was making time for everything except the things that mattered most. I was mentally tired, sure, but I was also caught in comfort behaviors, watching things, scrolling, avoiding. And the worst part? I didn't even feel better afterward. I felt more drained. Eventually, I had to accept something uncomfortable. Time wasn't the issue. Focus was. I started to track my days, even just loosely. I asked myself, what's the first thing I do after waking up? Where does my attention go when I'm tired? What activities give me energy, and which ones steal it? That simple awareness helped me start designing my time around energy, not just obligations. That's the shift I want to offer you today. Don't just manage your time. Manage your energy. Ask yourself, when am I most focused? When am I most creative? Then protect those windows. Don't waste your best hours on things that don't serve your goals. Instead, make time for what matters, even if it's only 20 minutes a day. Because those 20 minutes, done consistently and with attention, can change your life more than 3 distracted hours ever could. Of course, this requires boundaries, with yourself and with others. You may need to say no to things. You may need to log off, mute notifications, or be less available. And yes, that can feel uncomfortable. But remember, every yes is a no to something else. When you say yes to scrolling, you say no to studying. When you say yes to busyness, you might be saying no to purpose. Time management, at its core, is really about decision-making and deciding what matters most to you. So here's your challenge prompt for today. How much of your day goes to what truly matters to you? Not what's urgent, not what other people expect, but what's meaningful to you. Be honest, not to shame yourself, but to see yourself. Because once you see clearly, you can start to choose differently. Before we move on, let me remind you of one more English expression. Make time. We don't say find time, as if time is just lying around, waiting to be discovered. We say make time, because meaningful things require intention. You have to carve them out, protect them, commit to them. And if you fall off track, that's okay. You're human. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Just take a breath, reset, and make a better choice next time. Because every moment is a chance to realign with what matters. In our next episode, we'll arrive at the final piece of the growth formula. One that might be small on the surface, but enormous in impact. Habits. You won't want to miss it. But for now, I invite you to pause and ask yourself, Am I investing my time like it matters, or spending it like it doesn't? Let's keep growing. H. Habits. The subconscious drivers. We've talked about goals, routines, ownership, willpower, and time management, the pillars of conscious growth. But now, let's turn our attention to something that often happens beneath the surface, almost invisibly: habits. Habits are the silent architects of our daily lives. They shape our actions before we even realize it, sometimes without us even wanting them to. You could say, habits are the subconscious drivers of behavior. They're like well-worn paths in the forest of our minds. Once a path is clear and easy to follow, our brain prefers it because it saves energy. This is why so much of what we do day to day feels automatic. We don't have to think about brushing our teeth or locking the door. Those actions simply happen. And that automaticity can be both a blessing and a curse. Psychologists describe habits as loops made of three parts: a trigger, a routine, and a reward. The trigger is the signal that starts the habit. Maybe it's waking up, feeling stressed, or hearing a certain sound. The routine is the behavior itself, the action we fall into. And the reward is the positive feeling or relief that reinforces the habit, making it more likely to happen again. Think about checking your phone when a notification pings. The sound is the trigger, picking up the phone is the routine, and the rush of connection or distraction is the reward. Understanding this loop is crucial because it shows us that breaking a habit isn't about willpower alone. In fact, trying to simply stop a habit without replacing it often leads to frustration and relapse. Instead, what science and experience tell us is this: you need to replace the habit with a new routine that delivers a similar reward. In other words, you're not just breaking old patterns, you're retraining your brain. This retraining is not a quick fix. Habits are deeply embedded in our neural circuits. That's why it takes consistent effort and patience to create new, healthier habits that eventually become just as automatic as the old ones. For example, if you want to reduce mindless snacking, you might replace it with a habit of drinking water or taking a brief walk when the urge hits. Over time, your brain will start to associate the trigger with the new, positive routine, and the old habit fades into the background. What's fascinating is how much of our behavior is actually habitual, without us even realizing it. How much of your daily behavior is driven by conscious intention? And how much by habit? This is a powerful question because it invites us to step back and observe our own patterns. When you start noticing the moments you fall into automatic behavior, you open a window into the parts of your life that may be limiting or supporting you without your direct awareness. For many people, habits are like the autopilot of their lives. We often resist the idea that something as simple as small, repeated actions can have such a profound effect. But it's true. Habits are the foundation for both growth and stagnation. The good news is, because habits operate below conscious thought, they can be changed, but it requires gentle persistence, not harsh judgment. Here's an insight I want to share from my own experience. I used to struggle with procrastination, especially when it came to language practice. I knew what I needed to do, but I often found myself distracted or avoiding it entirely. Instead of beating myself up, I started to pay attention to the triggers. I noticed that my habit of procrastinating usually kicked in right after lunch, when I felt a natural dip in energy. Instead of fighting that urge, I created a new habit. I set a timer for just 10 minutes of focused study after lunch, followed by a small reward like a short break or a cup of tea. Slowly, this tiny habit replaced the old avoidance pattern, and my productivity improved without me relying solely on willpower. This experience showed me something important. Habits are not your enemy. They're your brain's way of managing complexity. When you learn to work with your habits rather than against them, you unlock incredible potential for transformation. So here's your reflection prompt for today. How much of your daily behavior is driven by conscious intention, and how much by habit? What are the habits that serve you, and which ones might be quietly holding you back? And how might you begin to gently retrain your brain, step by step? As we continue this journey, keep in mind that lasting growth doesn't come from sudden, dramatic changes. It comes from small, repeated choices, the habits you build day in, day out. They're the invisible architecture of transformation, shaping who you are over time. In our next and final episode, we'll take a step back and weave together everything we've covered in the growth formula. We'll explore how these elements connect to create a powerful framework for self-development, one that you can carry with you long after this podcast ends. But for now, take a moment. Notice a habit you have right now. Just observe it, without judgment. That awareness is the first step to change. Let's keep growing, together. Conclusion. Growth as a lifelong process. As we arrive at the end of this journey through the growth formula, I want to take a moment with you to slow down, breathe, and reflect on what we've uncovered together. Because growth, at its core, is not a destination to reach or a finish line to cross. It's not a checklist to complete or a box to tick. Growth is a way of engaging with life itself, a continuous unfolding, an ongoing dialogue between who you are and who you are becoming. Remember the 6 pillars we explored: goals, routine, ownership, willpower, time management, and habits. Each one plays a unique role, but none stands alone. They are threads woven into the same fabric, the fabric of transformation. Your goals give you a vision, a direction to move toward. Your routines provide the steady rhythm that keeps you anchored day in, day out. Ownership reminds you that the reins are in your hands, that you are the author of your story, no matter the circumstances. Willpower helps you weather the storms within, those moments of doubt, resistance, or fear when giving up feels like the easier option. Time management teaches you to treat your attention like precious currency, invested wisely and with intention. And habits, those invisible drivers beneath the surface, quietly shape the landscape of your life with every repeated action. Think of these elements not as rules, but as companions on your path. Sometimes they may feel strong and clear, guiding your steps with confidence. Other times, they might falter or waver, and that's perfectly natural. Growth is never a straight line. It's more like a river, winding and flowing, sometimes rushing and sometimes still. There will be moments when you feel deeply connected to your purpose, and others when the current pulls you away, into unfamiliar waters. I invite you to approach your own growth with kindness and curiosity, to listen with patience to your internal dialogue, even when it's critical or fearful. When was the last time you truly listened to your inner voice, the one beneath all the noise and expectation? That voice often speaks softly, but it holds profound wisdom. In this process, it's important to remember that growth is a personal journey, deeply individual and yet profoundly universal. We all grapple with similar challenges: the pull between comfort and change, the tension between intention and habit, the dance of resilience and vulnerability. But the way forward is unique to you. Your goals, your routines, your choices, these are reflections of your values, your dreams, your lived experience. So here's a question for you to carry with you beyond this episode. How will you engage with growth today? Not as a distant goal, but as a way of living? How will you cultivate your garden, tending to the seeds of change with patience, attention, and grace? If you have a journal or a quiet space, I encourage you to write this down. Reflect on the 6 elements. Which ones feel like strengths in your life right now? Which ones could use a little more nurturing? What small step can you take today, no matter how modest, to honor your growth? As you move forward, remember that every choice, every moment of awareness, is a chance to steer your life toward deeper fulfillment. Growth is not about perfection. It's about progress. One breath, one thought, one action at a time. Thank you for allowing me to walk this path with you. It's an honor to be part of your journey, to share this space where language meets life, where learning becomes transformation. Until next time, keep growing, keep reflecting, and keep embracing the beautiful complexity of becoming. This is Jason, and you're listening to Code Your English, your self-development hub, where words and wisdom come together. Take care, and I'll see you soon.